one of the world's great rivers, it cuts through the largest rainforest outside the Amazon, with wildlife found nowhere else on Earth. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is a vast, beautiful but tormented place. For centuries, its resources have been plundered and it's been ravaged by war.
Deep in the heart of Africa lies a land that has witnessed more horror and mystery than almost anywhere on Earth. The Democratic Republic of Congo, with its vast unexplored jungles and violent history, continues to reveal discoveries that challenge our understanding of nature, humanity, and the darkness we're capable of. From creatures that shouldn't exist to crimes that defy comprehension, these findings have left scientists, historians, and investigators stunned.
The recent troubles in the Kasai region made this discovery. Along with the March 22nd discovery, it now brings the total number of mass graves found to 23. At this stage, investigators don't know the number of people buried at these sites or who carried out the killing.
The Bili apes. In 2001, scientists investigated reports from remote villages near Bili in northern Congo about enormous chimpanzees that behaved unlike any known primates. What they found defied explanation. These apes, now called Bili apes or Bondo mystery apes, display characteristics that blur the line between chimpanzees and gorillas. They're massive, some standing over 6 feet tall, with footprints measuring up to their considerable size. But size isn't what shocked researchers most. These apes howl at the moon, build ground nests like gorillas, and show no fear of humans or leopards. Most disturbing are reports of them killing lions and displaying pack-hunting behavior never documented in chimps. Local hunters described finding lion carcasses in areas where these apes roam. For years, the scientific community dismissed these accounts as folklore. Then, researchers captured photographic evidence and conducted field studies that confirmed something genuinely unusual exists in these forests. Whether they're a unique subspecies, a chimp-gorilla hybrid, or something else entirely remains debated. The Mokele Mbembe expeditions. For over a century, indigenous peoples of the Congo River Basin have reported encounters with a creature they call Mokele Mbembe, roughly translated as one who stops the flow of rivers. Descriptions consistently match a sauropod dinosaur with a long neck, small head, and enormous body. The Likuala swamp region has been the focus of multiple scientific expeditions since the 1910s. In 1980, biologist Roy Mackal led a serious expedition documenting numerous eyewitness accounts from people who had never seen dinosaur pictures, yet described identical creatures. Local communities take these accounts so seriously they've identified specific areas they avoid. Footprints measuring 3 feet in diameter with 3 clawed toes have been photographed but never definitively explained. While mainstream science remains skeptical, the consistency of reports across isolated communities with no contact between them raises questions. The Congo Basin remains one of Earth's least explored regions, with vast swamps inaccessible even by boat. Several expeditions have reported strange sounds and massive disturbances in water where no known animals could cause them. Whether Mokele Mbembe exists or not, the fact that trained biologists continue investigating tells you something about the credibility of evidence they've encountered. Mass graves of the rubber terror. Between 1885 and 1908, Congo wasn't a colony but the private property of Belgium's King Leopold II. What researchers have uncovered about this period ranks among history's greatest atrocities. Archaeological excavations and historical investigations have revealed mass graves containing thousands of victims of the rubber terror. Leopold's agents forced entire villages into rubber collection quotas so impossible that failure meant death. Evidence shows that hands were systematically cut from living people, including children, as punishment or proof of killings. Recent ground-penetrating radar studies have identified potential mass grave sites that could contain hundreds of thousands of remains. In 2020, Belgian researchers discovered documentation proving the scale of killing was even worse than previously believed. Entire regions were depopulated. Conservative estimates place the death toll at 10 million people, though some historians argue it reached 15 million. Villages that failed to meet quotas were burned, and survivors were often mutilated. Physical evidence keeps emerging, from shackles and chains to photographs that Leopold's agents took as trophies. These discoveries continue to fuel demands for Belgium to acknowledge the full scope of these crimes. the radioactive cobalt mines. Congo sits atop some of the world's richest uranium and cobalt deposits. During the Cold War, these mines supplied material for nuclear weapons. What's been discovered in recent years is terrifying. Abandoned mining sites contain radiation levels hundreds of times above safe limits. In 2018, investigative journalists equipped with Geiger counters found areas where radioactive waste was simply dumped in pits or rivers. Workers were never informed about radiation risks, and thousands likely died from exposure. Even more disturbing, many of these sites have no security. Radioactive materials lay exposed where anyone, including children, can access them. Recent satellite imagery analysis has identified dozens of abandoned uranium processing sites with no environmental remediation. Local communities built homes using radioactive rocks from these sites without knowing the danger. Medical researchers have documented elevated cancer rates and birth defects in mining regions. International authorities have known about this contamination for decades, but done virtually nothing. The cobalt in your smartphone likely came from these regions, where miners still work in conditions that would be illegal anywhere else, often unaware they're handling radioactive materials. The blood falls phenomenon. In several remote cave systems in eastern Congo, researchers have documented water flowing from underground that runs deep red. Initially thought to be iron oxide, chemical analysis revealed something more disturbing. The red coloration comes from a combination of iron oxidizing bacteria and what appears to be decomposing organic matter in massive quantities underground. In 2016, a spelunking expedition traced one of these flows to a massive underground chamber filled with red-stained water. What created the organic matter causing this coloration remains unknown, but theories range from ancient mass death events to undiscovered underground ecosystems. Local legends speak of these sites as places where the earth bleeds, and many communities avoid them. The phenomenon intensifies during certain times of year, suggesting connection to underground water tables or geological processes scientists don't fully understand. Some of these red flows contain bacteria that survive in conditions previously thought impossible for life. Research into these systems might reveal information about early Earth or even extraterrestrial life possibilities. Cannibal militia testimonies. During Congo's civil wars from 1996 to 2003, documentation emerged of systematic cannibalism practiced by various militia groups. This isn't legend or propaganda, but confirmed through testimonies, investigations, and in some cases, photographic evidence. In 2003, UN investigators interviewed dozens of witnesses who described rebel groups consuming victims as both a terror tactic and ritualistic practice. Some militias believed eating enemies transferred their power or protected them from bullets. Survivors described being forced to watch as family members were killed and consumed. In Ituri province, investigators documented specific commanders who ordered these practices and witnesses who participated under duress. The Congolese government and international courts have prosecuted several cases where cannibalism was proven beyond doubt. Warlords like Jean-Pierre Bemba faced charges that included commanding forces that engaged in these practices. What makes these discoveries particularly horrifying is the systematic nature, not isolated incidents, but organized policy in certain armed groups. Anthropologists studying the conflict found that some militias used cannibalism as initiation rituals for child soldiers, forcing them to commit acts that made returning to normal society psychologically impossible. The Kasai mass grave sites. Between 2016 and 2018, the Kasai region experienced violence that the world largely ignored. When UN investigators finally gained access in 2018, they discovered mass graves that shocked even experienced human rights workers. Satellite imagery analysis identified at least 80 suspected mass grave sites containing potentially thousands of bodies. Ground investigations confirmed graves with hundreds of victims, including women and children executed en masse. Some sites showed evidence of systematic killing, with bodies arranged in ways suggesting organized massacre rather than combat deaths. The violence began when government forces killed a traditional leader, triggering a rebellion and brutal crackdown. Investigators documented villages where every resident was either killed or displaced. Some mass graves were found in schoolyards and churches where people sought sanctuary. What disturbed investigators most was evidence that victims were often buried alive to save bullets. Witnesses described truckloads of bound people dumped into pits and covered with earth. Many graves remain unexcavated due to security concerns and lack of resources. The exact death toll may never be known, but estimates range from 3,000 to 5,000 people. As recently as 2022, new grave sites were still being discovered as displaced people returned to their villages. Mysterious disease outbreaks. Congo's rainforests are essentially disease laboratories where viruses jump from animals to humans in ways science struggles to predict or prevent. Beyond known diseases like Ebola, mysterious outbreaks occur regularly that defy easy explanation. In 2007, an illness called bleeding eye disease struck villages in Wicca, causing victims to hemorrhage from eyes and gums before dying. The pathogen was never identified. In 2015, a mysterious paralytic illness affected dozens in Orientali province, with symptoms matching no known disease. Children were primarily affected, developing sudden paralysis that ascended from their legs upward. Some recovered, others died, but the cause remains unknown. These aren't isolated incidents. Congo experiences multiple unexplained disease clusters annually that never reach international attention. The combination of extreme biodiversity, human encroachment into previously untouched forest, and bushmeat hunting creates constant opportunity for novel pathogens. Scientists investigating these outbreaks often arrive to find victims already buried and communities scattered, making identification impossible. The fear is that one of these mystery diseases could become the next pandemic. Remote villages often experience complete die-offs that are only discovered weeks or months later when traders notice the silence. The slave trade dungeons. While most people associate slavery in Africa with the Atlantic trade, Congo was a major source for the Arab Swahili slave trade that operated for centuries. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed the infrastructure of this horror. In eastern Congo, researchers have found underground chambers carved from rock where slaves were held before transport to Zanzibar and Middle Eastern markets. Some of these dungeons contained shackles still attached to walls and skeletal remains. In 2017, excavations near Kalemi uncovered a massive holding facility that could contain hundreds of people simultaneously. Chemical analysis of the walls revealed human remains mixed into the mortar, suggesting bodies of those who died in captivity were literally built into the structure. Historical records indicate millions of Congolese were enslaved through this network, but physical evidence was thought lost. These discoveries prove the scale and organization of operations that continued into the early 1900s, decades after the Atlantic slave trade ended. Some sites show evidence of systematic murder when slaves became too ill to sell. Archaeologists have found mass graves adjacent to holding facilities containing victims of disease, starvation, and execution. Extinct species rediscoveries. The Congo Basin is so vast and unexplored that animals believed extinct for decades keep turning up alive. In 2019, researchers confirmed populations of African forest elephants in areas where they hadn't been seen in 40 years. More remarkably, in 2006, researchers rediscovered the Congo Bay owl, unseen since 1951 and known from only one previous specimen. Trail cameras deployed for leopard studies have captured images of animals that defy identification, including what appears to be an undescribed species of large forest cat. Local hunters regularly report animals that don't match known species. The Congo peafowl, unknown to science until 1936, proved that large bird species could hide in these forests for centuries. Recent expeditions have photographed primates displaying characteristics that don't match described subspecies, suggesting unknown populations or even species remain uncatalogued. In 2021, environmental DNA sampling from remote rivers Somosoas revealed genetic material from fish species thought extinct since the 1950s. The forest is so dense and dangerous that vast areas have never been surveyed by scientists. Indigenous peoples report animals they've known for generations that science has never documented. Each expedition brings surprises, from insects the size of dinner plates to reports of striped lions that sound like folklore, until you hear the same descriptions from isolated communities that have never had contact. The poisoned river systems. Congo's rivers, once teeming with life, are becoming dead zones due to mining contamination. Investigations using satellite imagery and water sampling have revealed the staggering scope of this disaster. In Katanga province, entire river systems run orange or red from copper and cobalt mining waste. Fish populations have collapsed across thousands of square kilometers. In 2020, researchers documented sections of the Kasai River with lead levels 1,000 times above safe limits and mercury contamination that makes fish consumption potentially fatal. The contamination spreads downstream, affecting millions who depend on these rivers for water and food. What makes this discovery particularly terrifying is that much of the pollution comes from artisanal mining, meaning it's not centralized or controllable. Thousands of small mining operations dump waste directly into tributaries. Heavy metals accumulate in the food chain, with predator fish containing toxin levels that can cause immediate illness. Medical surveys in affected areas show elevated rates of neurological disorders, particularly in children. Some villages have been abandoned as water sources became completely unusable. The contamination will persist for centuries, even if mining stopped today. Rivers that were major protein sources for communities now carry poisons that silently accumulate in anyone consuming their fish. Child sorcerer accusations. One of Congo's most disturbing social phenomena is the widespread accusation of children as witches or sorcerers. Investigations by human rights groups have documented thousands of cases where children, some as young as 3, are accused of causing illness, death, or bad fortune through witchcraft. What happens next is horrifying. These children are tortured during exorcisms, forced to confess to supernatural crimes, and then abandoned or killed. Churches, particularly certain Pentecostal congregations, have been implicated in promoting and profiting from these accusations. Pastors charge families for violent exorcism rituals. In Kinshasa alone, an estimated 20,000 to 30,000 children live on the streets after being accused of witchcraft and expelled from their families. Many of these children were targeted because they're from poor families who can't afford to feed them, and the accusation provides justification for abandonment. Some show physical evidence of torture, burns from holy water that's actually acid, lash marks from beatings, and psychological trauma that may never heal. Recent investigations found that the phenomenon accelerated during economic crises when families became more desperate. The Congolese government passed laws against these practices, but enforcement is nearly non-existent. Aid workers who rescue accused children report that many were beaten so severely they suffer permanent disabilities. The lava lake of Nyiragongo. Mount Nyiragongo contains one of the world's largest lava lakes, and recent geological surveys have revealed just how catastrophic an eruption could be. This isn't theoretical. In 2002, lava flows from Nyiragongo destroyed 15% of Goma, a city of 500,000 people. The lava moved so fast that hundreds died unable to escape. What scientists have discovered since is even more alarming. The lava lake sits above a massive magma chamber that's larger than previously estimated. Seismic studies show that the volcanic system connects to several other volcanoes, creating potential for synchronized eruptions. The lava at Nyiragongo is unusually fluid due to low silica content, meaning it can flow at speeds up to 60 miles per hour, faster than any human can run. In 2021, another eruption sent lava toward Goma, and only a last-minute change in flow direction prevented massive casualties. Monitoring equipment frequently fails due to lack of funding, meaning scientists often have minimal warning. The volcano sits in a highly populated region where evacuation is nearly impossible due to limited roads and nearby conflict zones. Researchers have identified fracture zones, suggesting the volcano's flank could collapse, which would send lava directly into Lake Kivu. That lake contains massive amounts of dissolved carbon dioxide and methane that could be released in a limnic eruption, potentially killing millions through asphyxiation. Illegal coltan mining operations. Your smartphone, laptop, and gaming console likely contain minerals extracted under conditions that would horrify you. Investigations into Congo's coltan mining operations have revealed an industry built on violence, child labor, and environmental destruction. Coltan, which contains tantalum needed for electronic capacitors, comes primarily from eastern Congo, much of it controlled by armed groups. Undercover investigations have documented children as young as 7 working in mines that regularly collapse, burying workers alive. In 2019, journalists traced the supply chain from conflict-controlled mines to major electronics companies, revealing how blood minerals enter legitimate commerce. Miners work in pits 30 feet deep that are dug by hand without any safety measures. Collapses kill dozens weekly, but bodies are often simply buried wherever they fall, and mining continues. Armed groups tax every stage of production, meaning your phone purchase indirectly funds militias responsible for mass atrocities. The mining has also devastated gorilla habitats, with armed miners killing endangered gorillas for bushmeat. Surrounding areas show massive deforestation and river contamination. Mining zones are essentially lawless, where rape is systematic and anyone questioning the arrangement disappears. International regulations exist to prevent conflict minerals from entering supply chains, but enforcement is weak and fraudulent certification is common. The Pygmy enslavement crisis. The indigenous forest peoples of Congo, collectively known as Pygmies, though they prefer specific ethnic names like Mbuti or Batwa, face what human rights groups have documented as ongoing enslavement. This isn't historical, it's happening right now. Investigations have found that some Bantu communities treat Pygmy peoples as property, forcing them to work without pay and subjecting them to violence if they resist. In 2010, UN investigators documented villages where Pygmy families were held in conditions meeting every definition of slavery. They're forced to hunt and gather forest products for Bantu masters who provide only minimal food in return. Women are sexually exploited systematically. Children are sometimes taken and raised as servants. What makes this particularly devastating is that it's culturally normalized in some regions. Perpetrators don't see themselves as committing crimes because they view Pygmies as less than human. The Pygmy population has no political power and limited legal recourse. Those who escape to towns face severe discrimination that makes survival nearly impossible. Some activist groups have documented and attempted to prosecute these cases, but convictions are rare. The forest peoples are also being displaced by conservation efforts that ban them from traditional territories, forcing them into dependence on communities that exploit them. Ebola's ground zero. Congo has experienced more Ebola outbreaks than any other country, and investigations into these outbreaks have traced them to specific practices and locations in the rainforest. The 2018 outbreak in North Kivu province became the second deadliest Ebola outbreak in history, with over 2,200 deaths. Researchers traced its origin to a single individual who likely contracted the virus through bushmeat hunting. What these investigations have discovered is a ticking time bomb. The virus persists in animal populations throughout the forest, particularly in bats. Human encroachment into previously untouched forest areas creates constant opportunity for spillover events. Some outbreaks have been traced to specific caves where people harvest bat guano for fertilizer. The tradition of preparing and consuming bushmeat, including bats and primates, creates direct exposure routes. What terrifies epidemiologists is that each outbreak gives the virus opportunity to mutate, potentially becoming more transmissible or deadly. The 2018 outbreak occurred in an active conflict zone, making containment nearly impossible. Health workers were attacked and killed by communities that believed they were spreading disease rather than fighting it. Some treatment centers were burned to the ground. Investigations also revealed that survivors can harbor the virus in immunologically protected sites like the eye or testes for months, creating unexpected transmission chains. The combination of poverty, conflict, cultural practices, and one of Earth's most biodiverse disease environments makes Congo a likely source for future pandemics. The forgotten shipwrecks. Congo's rivers and the Atlantic coastline contain dozens of shipwrecks that tell dark stories of colonialism. Maritime archaeologists have identified steamships that sank while transporting forced laborers during the Leopold era. In 2015, divers explored a wreck in the Congo River near Mbandaka and found shackles and chains still inside the hull, confirming it was used to transport enslaved people even after slavery was officially abolished. Some wrecks contain evidence of deliberate sinking to destroy evidence of atrocities. Near the river mouth, fishermen regularly snagged nets on submerged vessels from the colonial period, some of which were armed gunboats used to enforce Leopold's brutal policies. Historical records mention ships that disappeared with hundreds of Congolese aboard. and some of these have now been located. The condition of these wrecks suggests they sank violently, possibly scuttled. Others are merchant vessels from the early 1900s that carried ivory and rubber extracted through forced labor. Each shipwreck is essentially a crime scene from history containing evidence of the industrial-scale brutality that built European fortunes. Few have been systematically explored due to dangerous river conditions and limited archaeological resources, but local oral histories often identify where important wrecks lie and what they carried. Underground militia networks. In eastern Congo's mineral-rich regions, armed groups have created extensive underground tunnel systems that serve as bases, weapon storage, and escape routes. Satellite imagery analysis combined with ground investigations has revealed the stunning scale of these networks. Some tunnel systems extend for miles, connecting multiple surface points and containing living quarters for dozens of fighters. In 2017, Congolese military operations discovered a tunnel network near Beni that included sleeping areas, weapons caches, and stockpiles of stolen minerals. The tunnels were sophisticated, with ventilation shafts and structural reinforcement. What makes these networks particularly dangerous is that they make militia groups nearly impossible to eliminate through conventional military operations. Forces can disappear underground when attacked and emerge elsewhere. Some tunnels connect to active or abandoned mines, creating mazes that outsiders can't navigate. Local populations often know about these systems, but providing information to authorities means certain death. The tunnels are also used to traffic minerals, weapons, and sometimes kidnap victims. Some networks have been expanded using forced labor, including children. Several human rights investigations have documented captives held in underground chambers for months. The full extent of these tunnel systems remains unknown, but evidence suggests they've been developing for decades, with some possibly incorporating colonial-era mining tunnels. The Elephant Massacre Fields. Satellite imagery and drone surveys have revealed killing fields where industrial-scale elephant poaching has occurred. In 2012, researchers using high-resolution satellite photos identified areas in Garamba National Park where dozens of elephant carcasses were clustered, visible from space. Ground investigations found massacre sites where entire herds, sometimes 30 or more elephants, were killed simultaneously using automatic weapons. The ivory was removed with chainsaws, and bodies were left to rot. What these discoveries revealed was that poaching had evolved from opportunistic hunting to military-style operations. Armed groups, some with connections to terrorist organizations, deploy helicopters and heavy weapons to slaughter elephants at scale. In some cases, the killing was so indiscriminate that babies and pregnant females were killed even though their ivory has minimal value. The poachers aren't local villagers, but organized criminal networks operating across borders. Investigations traced ivory from Congo massacres to markets in China and Southeast Asia. Some killing fields show evidence of ambush tactics where elephants were driven toward waiting gunmen. Rangers who patrol these areas have found carcasses still too dangerous to approach because armed poachers remain nearby. The psychological impact on surviving elephant populations has been documented, with herds showing trauma responses and altered behavior patterns that may persist for generations. Unexploded ordnance zones. Decades of warfare have left Congo contaminated with unexploded bombs, artillery shells, landmines, and grenades that kill and maim regularly. Comprehensive surveys have identified vast areas where unexploded ordnance makes farming, development, or even walking deadly. Some munitions date to the world wars when Congo was a battlefield between colonial powers. Others are from the independence conflicts of the 1960s or the more recent civil wars. In rural areas, children regularly find and play with grenades or mines, often with fatal results. Farmers plowing fields detonate buried shells. Recent surveys using ground-penetrating radar have identified ordnance contamination levels comparable to the most heavily mined countries on Earth. What makes Congo's situation particularly bad is the complete lack of systematic clearance operations. Areas known to be contaminated have no marking or fencing. Villages exist in regions where explosive devices are routinely uncovered. Some communities have adapted by developing informal knowledge of dangerous zones, but this information dies with elders or is forgotten. International demining organizations have cleared small areas, but the scope of contamination is so vast that at current rates, it would take centuries to make the country safe. Medical facilities regularly treat blast injuries from unexploded ordnance, and many victims die before reaching help due to rural distances and poor roads. The Democratic Republic of Congo continues to reveal horrors that challenge our assumptions about what's possible, what's hidden, and what humans are capable of. These discoveries, from creatures that shouldn't exist to crimes we struggle to comprehend, remind us that vast areas of our world remain fundamentally mysterious, and that the darkness of human history isn't safely in the past. As long as these forests remain and conflicts continue, Congo will keep yielding secrets that shock the world.